A reading from the book of Ruth. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife, Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other, Ruth. When they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that Naomi was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. Then Naomi started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So Naomi said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the 2 of them went on until they arrived in Bethlehem. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Come with me as we venture back 1,000 years before the birth of Jesus to a time when the Hebrew people were engulfed by famine. Life became so desperate that many fled their country in order to avoid starvation. One family that made this journey, a father, a mother, and 2 sons, traveled from Bethlehem to a country called Moab. It was located in a mountainous region which is now present-day Jordan. It was foreign territory. Everything about it was unfamiliar. that they could find work there, and they could find food. They could survive. This family of 4 traveled to this alien land in hopes of avoiding hardship. But affliction stalked them. Not long after arriving in Moab, the father died, leaving the mother alone to make ends meet and to raise these 2 young boys. She was grieving the death of her husband. She was living in a strange land. She was trying to scratch out a meager existence. She was struggling to raise 2 boys. When someone you love dies, it knocks you off stride. You may be capable of maintaining your routine and performing the chores, but you no longer glide through them with the same ease. Your footing is less certain. Your ability to concentrate wanes, and the light in your eyes dims. Naomi willed herself forward. With 2 boys to care for, she had no choice. Somehow, she managed. Then the boys grow up. They become teenagers, and as teenage boys do, they become aware of girls. It was not long before each of them was drawn to a young woman of this native country, this foreign country. It was not exactly what Naomi had envisioned for her sons. One writer imagines a conversation that ensues between Naomi and one of the boys. Now, son, it's not that what's her name is a bad girl. Mother, her name is Ruth. All right, Ruth. It's not that Ruth is a bad girl, it's just that her people are peculiar. She's a little different. What you're trying to say, Mother, is that she's a Moab, right? As you might imagine, Naomi was unsuccessful in preventing her sons from falling in love with these local girls. How were her boys supposed to find nice middle-class Jewish girls in Moab? So in a few months, Naomi finds herself with not 1, but 2 Moabite daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth. The mother tries to make the best of the situation, but it's more than just a little awkward. Dear, she says to Ruth one day, you have such nice complexion. Couldn't you do with a little less makeup? And you're not going to get a tattoo, are you? Well, as some of you know, being a mother-in-law is not the easiest job in town. However, over the years, Naomi began to appreciate some of the young women's qualities, and a bond began to develop among them. Thank goodness, because calamity was poised to strike again. Naomi was walloped by every parent's nightmare. One of her sons died, and the heartache was overwhelming. And while she's reeling from the death of this son, the inconceivable happens. Her one last remaining son dies also. I suspect the sadness in her soul robbed her of her appetite and her strength. She might not have endured the bitter blows had it not been for these 2 daughters-in-law. Their shared losses drew them closer together than ever. They cared for one another. They leaned on each other. They learned to support each other and to depend on each other. While the 3 were recovering from the devastating blows that death had dealt them, news reaches that living conditions back in Judah have improved. The drought ended. The rains are bringing back the crops. And Naomi began to hear her native land beckoning her name. Having been forced to bury her husband and 2 sons in a foreign land, I suspect she wanted to make sure she got back home before she perished. So she made plans to return and told the daughters-in-law that soon she would depart. To Naomi's surprise, they both say, "We're coming with you." Naomi was deeply moved by their loyalty, but she knew that Israel did not hold a promising future for these 2 foreign girls. She insisted they stay in Moab, where they'd find new husbands, where they could start their own family. Orpah saw the logic of Naomi's plea. She stayed in Moab. But Ruth clung to her mother-in-law and refused to leave her side. Naomi had come to love Ruth as her own daughter, but she did not want to strap Ruth with an aging mother-in-law. She insisted that Ruth stay with her own people, but Ruth was fiercely determined, and her devotion to Naomi was unshakable. She responded to Naomi with one of the most beloved and lyrical passages in all the pages of Scripture. She said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will become my people. Your God will become my God." Her words stand as a testament of devotion for one person for another. They speak volumes about commitment and determination and sacrifice and selflessness. Now, in most ways, the modern world has far surpassed the ancient world. Our insights into the physical universe, our modes of transportation, our amazing array of technological devices, all of these are light years beyond the wildest dreams of the ancients. However, sometimes ancient spiritual wisdom produces a gem that the modern world seems to have forgotten. The story of Ruth illustrates the depths and the demands of authentic love. By comparison, talk of love in our day often seems superficial. Movies, books, online dating sites all provide lots of conversations about love, but most of the time, love is described as little more than a feeling. Love is a special feeling, a warm feeling. Love's a wonderful feeling. Love's a unique feeling. Love's a thrilling feeling. Love is a passionate feeling. But in the end, many people imagine that love is little more than a feeling. And then we're surprised when someone says he's getting divorced because he just doesn't have that same feeling he did when they first fell in love. I knew a man who waxed eloquent when telling his young daughter how much he loved her. He would say, "You're so precious to me. You're so dear. Honey, I just love you so much." But when she needed him to buy something for her, he made an excuse. He never showed up at her school events. And on those occasions when she needed a ride somewhere, he would take her, but he would always show up at least an hour late. He would say, "Oh, I love you so much." And for quite a while, she believed him, because she wanted to believe him. However, she grew older. She figured out that words do not always mean a great deal, and that love is a whole lot more than simply a feeling. As our story of Ruth illustrates, love is not selfish. It considers not only one's personal needs, but especially the needs of the other. Naomi's love for Ruth meant that she was willing to sacrifice her own well-being for what she believed was in the best interest of her daughter-in-law. With no husband and no children, Naomi's life would have been far easier and her future more secure if she had insisted that her daughter-in-law come along with her. Without Ruth, she was destined to live a lonely life. Yet she loved Ruth enough that she would not, or that she would put her own life at risk. She loved Ruth enough to advise Ruth that her best shot at a bright future was staying in her native land. But then Ruth responded with her own sacrificial love. She knew she'd be a lot more likely to find a husband in Moab, but her devotion ran so deep that she could not bear to think of her mother-in-law spending the remainder of her life alone. So Ruth said to Naomi, "Say whatever you want, but I'm coming with you." Love makes sacrifices. And the story of Ruth also shows us that genuine love must include commitment. When storms blow in, relationships can unravel. However, when people are committed to one another, they will not allow adversity to pull them apart. They face the blows of life together as an inseparable couple. They support each other, and their bond grows more robust as a result. And finally, the story of Ruth illustrates that when people are committed to making a relationship work, and they're willing to make sacrifices for each other, it plants seeds of hope. Had we read the entire story of Ruth, we would have discovered that life turned out beautiful for both Ruth and Naomi. Ruth accompanied her mother-in-law to this strange land, back to a place called Bethlehem, where Naomi helped Ruth find a new husband. And when Ruth and her husband had a son, it brought joy back to Naomi's life as she had a grandson that she could help raise. And if you know the full story, you know that the joy went well beyond that small family. Ruth's son grew up to have a son himself. He named him David, who became the greatest king of Israel. When two people are committed to each other, when their love is more than simply a feeling, when their love is founded on devotion and determination and a willingness to sacrifice for the other, then doors swing open and light spreads and hope blossoms.